Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So today this is going to be a pretty short vid going over a recent upgrade of mine to the cheapest GTX 1080 I could find in all of Australia. So this Pascal card comes with 8 gigs of VRAM, a 6 plus 8 pin power connector requirement, so pretty standard stuff. And it works just fine too. But we'll be going to the flaws of this card as well as its performance. So let's start off with the main issue, the noise of this card. So as you can hear, this is a pretty loud card, but that's only upon startup. Everything's fine after. Also, this display port, as shown here, doesn't work properly. It keeps capping my 240Hz display at 60, which is something I'll have to look into in the future, but it's not a deal breaker. Before getting into benchmarks, I want to go over the setup. So, Ryzen 5 2600X, 16 gigs of RAM, and the 1080. The CPU is the bottleneck, but it should work fine. So, let's get into the gaming. I've touched up a bit on my benchmarking methods, going for 1% and 0.1% lows to better demonstrate stutters. And with Star Wars Battlefront 2, there's no signs of stuttering, with the game's running at smooth as butter on 1080p ultra settings, with no issues whatsoever. And I'm pretty happy with this performance overall. So Overwatch at low settings 1080p gives us an average of 214 FPS. Now this stays pretty consistent throughout the entire session, but the menus and the respawns both produce stutters and freezes, which drops the 1% and 0.1% lows to 60 and 24 respectively. Moving on to more popular titles, we have Valorant running at 1080p low settings and returning an average of 236 FPS. This is a very playable experience and the frames remain pretty consistent throughout. Though with the CPU being our bottleneck here, the 1% lows are sliced in half and the 0.1% low is in the single digits because of freezes that incur during death sequences and respawns. So for Fortnite, another very popular title, at 1080p low with epic view distance, we achieved an average of 143 FPS. Now the 0.1% low is just 25 FPS because of the game's stuttery engine that has never been fixed, even on higher end systems. Then they struggle with the same problem. The gameplay overall is really smooth though. I've only seen drops to 100 FPS at most, and it's really enjoyable. Another very popular title, Apex Legends, runs on the system really smoothly with an average of 140 FPS at 1080p low. Now this casually reaches 144, which is perfect for anyone with a high refresh rate monitor and having a similar setup as I am. The 1% and 0.1% lows are also pretty high, which means you shouldn't run into any stutters when in a clutch situation, and yeah, you can frag just fine in this game. Moving on to the newest title we have on our benchmark playlist today, we have Forza Horizon 5. At 1080p ultra settings, it returns an average of 81 FPS with a 1% low of 62 and a 0.1% of 49. This should provide a great experience, and yeah, with high graphics and a high frame rate, this game should not be a problem for this 6-year-old monster of a card. Moving on to the next AAA title on our list. As we're sneaking around here in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we're getting a 74 FPS average out of our 1080p highest settings. Yeah, this is a really enjoyable experience. 1% and 0.1% lows are just below 60, which should provide you with buttery smooth gameplay throughout. As for Borderlands 3, at 1080p badass preset, we got an average of 68 FPS. The 1% and 0.1% lows are that low because of loading screens and just loading new levels in general. It doesn't affect gameplay as much as it seems. Moving on, we have Control, the notorious GPU-intensive title of 2019. This is still pretty hard to get to run on most modern hardware, and the 1080 handles it like a champ with a solid 60 FPS average at max settings 1080p. Dips are apparent here or there, but it doesn't affect gameplay too much, and you'll have a great time with this title. With the benchmarks done and dusted, we've reached the end of the video. So what's the moral of the story for today? The GTX 1080 kicks absolute ass in modern gaming. What it is basically a slightly weaker RTX 3060 with no ray tracing. That's pretty much it, and less VRAM if you're talking about the 12 gig version. Also, terrible driver support because Nvidia wants people to buy new cards, so that's a thing. But for 200 Aussie dollars, and considering I only game with this, it's perfect for my own use, and the price to performance value is unbeatable. And that's what I want to touch up on for this last section of the video. Local deals. Now, I stumbled upon this deal because I woke up at 4 a.m. for some reason on that day. So that's how I got my 1080. It's a really obscure deal on Facebook Marketplace and something that you won't run into at all. This is a one-of-a-time deal, and that's like the nature of local deals. It's just really hard to come by, and what it is basically low supply, high demand, and you know what happens when things like that are in play. It's just really hard to get your hands on the product you want, but it's not impossible. If you have a thriving local market, you should strive to get these kinds of deals whenever you can. Whereas if you have a market that's severely crippled, I recommend places like AliExpress or eBay because those places have more sort of concrete prices for these parts, even though it's slightly higher or like way higher than I would pay for one. It's still good value compared to like buying new, at least right now anyway, with prices still not coming down to MSRP just yet. And yeah, that should be it for this video. Thank you for joining me on this journey of struggling with this silly little 1080. And yeah, I hope to see you all next time. Like the video if you did, dislike it if you didn't. Subscribe to me if you want to see more future content. And I'll see you around. Hopefully, anyway. So, bye-bye.